My son faked my dementia in court. Then I played the secret video. There is a specific, suffocating kind of silence that fills a $2 million home when you are the only one left living in it. It is a silence heavy with the ghosts of the past, echoing with the memories of a life built brick by brick, sacrifice after sacrifice. For 35 years, my wife Claire and I poured our blood, sweat, and youth into our 4-bedroom colonial in Westchester County, New York. We polished the hardwood floors until they gleamed, planted the hydrangeas that bloomed every summer, and paid off the mortgage by working 80-hour weeks. This house was not just an asset. It was our masterpiece. It was a testament to a lifetime of honest work. But nobody warns you that the sanctuary you built to protect your family can easily become the very prize that turns your family against you. My name is Richard. I am 68 years old, and my world shifted on its axis on a freezing Tuesday morning in November. I was in the kitchen, pouring a cup of black coffee, when a sharp, authoritative knock rattled my oak front door. When I opened it, I was greeted by a uniformed police officer and a stern-looking woman holding a clipboard. She introduced herself as an investigator from Adult Protective Services. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and clinical detachment, explaining that they had received an urgent, credible report regarding my living conditions. According to the report, I was suffering from severe, undiagnosed dementia. I was allegedly leaving the stove on, wandering the neighborhood in my pajamas, and living in squalor. I was, according to the documents in her hand, a profound danger to myself. I stood there, wearing a freshly ironed button-down shirt and khakis, the smell of roasted coffee beans filling my immaculate, dust-free home. I calmly invited them inside. As the investigator walked through my spotless living room, checking the kitchen for hazards and finding nothing but a bowl of fresh fruit, I asked her the question that would shatter my heart into 1,000 pieces. I asked who filed the report. She hesitated, bound by certain protocols, but the look in her eyes gave it away before she even spoke. It was my son, Stephen. Stephen was our only child. We gave him the world. We drained our savings to send him to a prestigious Ivy League university, bought his first car, and paid the down payment on his first starter home. We raised him to be an honorable man. But the day Claire passed away 2 years ago, something inside Stephen died with her, replaced by a cold, calculating ambition. It started subtly. A few months after the funeral, Stephen and his wife, Melissa, began visiting more often. Melissa was a woman who wore designer clothes with prominent logos and looked at my antique furniture not with admiration, but like a pawnbroker assessing inventory. During Sunday dinners, Stephen would sigh heavily, placing a patronizing hand on my shoulder. "Dad, this house is just too much for you to maintain alone," he would say. "Have you thought about a nice assisted living facility? We found a gorgeous one in Florida. You could play golf." I told them I wasn't going anywhere. I was healthy, I walked 3 miles a day, and I managed my own finances with the precision of the accountant I used to be. But my refusal was entirely unacceptable to them. The visits became interrogations. Melissa would casually move my reading glasses to the refrigerator and then gasp when I couldn't find them, whispering loudly to Stephen about my deteriorating memory. They would insist I had forgotten conversations we never had. They were laying the groundwork, building a narrative of a frail, confused old man who needed to be stripped of his autonomy. But I am not a foolish man. A week before APS showed up at my door, I had installed a discreet indoor security camera in the living room to keep an eye on my golden retriever, Buster, while I was out. One evening, while reviewing the footage, I saw my own son walk into my kitchen, turn on the gas burner just a fraction of an inch without igniting it, and walk out. 10 minutes later, Melissa came downstairs, sniffing the air dramatically, screaming that I had nearly blown up the house. They used that fabricated incident as the cornerstone of their APS report. They had also procured a signed affidavit from a shady telehealth doctor they knew, a man who had never even been in the same room as me, stating that I was exhibiting clear signs of Alzheimer's. Sitting in my living room with the APS investigator, I realized the horrifying truth. Stephen's startup company was failing. Melissa's credit cards were maxed out from a lifestyle they couldn't afford. They didn't want to protect me. They were drowning, and they needed to liquidate my $2 million home to save themselves. If they could get me declared legally incompetent, Stephen would be appointed as my conservator. He would have total control of my bank accounts, my property, and my life. He could throw me into a sterile nursing home and put a for sale sign on my front lawn the very next day. When the APS worker left, visibly confused by the stark contrast between the report and the reality of my home, I didn't call Stephen. I didn't scream and I didn't cry. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Eleanor Vance. Eleanor was a ruthless, seasoned elder law attorney known in Westchester for tearing apart abusive guardianships. I sat in her mahogany office 3 hours later, playing the security footage of Stephen turning on the gas. Eleanor took off her glasses, her eyes narrowing into cold, hard slits. "Richard," she said, her voice like steel. "What your son is attempting is one of the most insidious forms of elder abuse. He is trying to steal your life while you're still living it. If you want to fight this, we can't just play defense. We have to annihilate his narrative so completely that a judge will never let him near your estate again." "What do we do?" I asked, feeling the grief of losing a son transform into a cold, focused fury. "We let him think he's winning," she replied. The next 3 months were a masterclass in silent warfare. Stephen filed a formal petition in family court for emergency guardianship. He and Melissa visited under the guise of caring for me, but I knew they were really just checking the inventory. I played my part perfectly. I acted slightly slower. I let them repeat themselves. I nodded when Melissa condescendingly explained how a microwave worked. I gave them enough rope to hang themselves. But behind their backs, I was busier than I had been in a decade. Under Eleanor's strict guidance, I voluntarily checked myself into the neurology department at Mount Sinai Hospital. I underwent 2 days of grueling, exhaustive neuropsychological testing, brain MRIs, and cognitive evaluations administered by the top geriatric neurologists in the state. The results were flawless. My cognitive function was exceptionally high for a man of my age, my memory was sharp, and my brain scans showed absolutely zero signs of dementia or decline. But I didn't stop at proving my mental competence. Stephen had claimed in his legal filings that I was physically frail, prone to falling, and unable to perform basic household tasks. So, the following weekend, I hired a professional roofing contractor to inspect my home. When he told me a section of shingles needed replacing, I didn't hire him to do it. I had Eleanor hire a legal videographer. With a safety harness secured, I climbed a 20-foot ladder and spent 4 hours ripping up and replacing the shingles myself, driving every nail with the strength of a man who refused to be buried alive. 2 weeks after that, I pinned a paper bib to my chest and ran the annual Westchester Seniors 10K marathon. I finished in under an hour. Eleanor had the finish line professionally photographed, time-stamped, and notarized. We were building an impenetrable fortress of evidence, while Stephen was busy measuring my house for open house staging. The day of the guardianship hearing arrived with a bitter winter chill. The courtroom was vast, intimidating, and paneled in dark wood. Stephen sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing a tailored navy suit, looking every bit the concerned, heartbroken son. Melissa sat in the gallery, dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue, wearing a somber black dress as if she were already attending my funeral. When the judge, a formidable woman in her 60s named Judge Holloway, called the court to order, Stephen's attorney began his theatrical performance. He painted a tragic picture of an elderly man descending into the dark abyss of dementia. He spoke of the gas incident, framing it as a near-fatal disaster. He dramatically read the affidavit from the telehealth doctor, pleading with the court to grant Stephen immediate emergency guardianship to save his father from himself. Stephen even took the stand. He looked directly at me, tears welling in his eyes. "I love my father," his voice cracked with rehearsed emotion. "It breaks my heart to do this, but he is a shell of the man he used to be. He can't take care of that massive house. He's a danger to himself. I just want him to be safe in a facility where professionals can watch him." I felt a physical sickness in my stomach. It was a terrifying realization that the boy you tucked into bed, the boy you taught to ride a bicycle, could stand under oath and lie with such terrifying ease. Then it was Eleanor's turn. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, and approached the bench. She didn't yell. She didn't raise her voice. She simply brought the hammer down. "Your Honor," Eleanor began, her voice carrying clearly across the silent room. "The petitioner has presented a compelling, emotional story. It is a story of a tragic cognitive decline. However, it is entirely a work of fiction. A fiction designed for one singular purpose: the hostile financial takeover of my client's $2 million estate." Stephen's lawyer jumped up to object, but Judge Holloway silenced him with a harsh wave of her hand. "Proceed, counselor." Eleanor handed a thick, bound medical binder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "Exhibit A, Your Honor. A comprehensive, independent neurological evaluation conducted 3 weeks ago by Dr. Eris Thorne, the head of neurology at Mount Sinai. It includes MRIs, cognitive scoring, and physical assessments. Dr. Thorne concludes that Mr. Harrison possesses the cognitive function of a man 20 years his junior. There is absolutely no dementia. Stephen went visibly pale. He turned to his lawyer, whispering frantically. Furthermore, Eleanor continued, turning to face Stephen directly, the petitioner claims his father is physically frail and unable to maintain his home. We would like to direct the court's attention to the monitor. The bailiff dimmed the lights and pressed play on a laptop. The screen illuminated, showing crisp, 4K video footage. There I was, 68 years old, scaling a tall aluminum ladder with a bundle of architectural shingles on my shoulder. The video showed me on the roof, pulling out a hammer, and going to work with rhythmic, powerful strikes. The camera zoomed in on the timestamp and the day's newspaper I had held up at the start of the video. The clip ended, and instantly transitioned to a photograph of me crossing the finish line of a 10K marathon, drenched in sweat but smiling, holding a finisher's medal. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, suffocating. Melissa had stopped dabbing her eyes. She was staring at the screen in frozen, wide-eyed horror. Does this look like a man who needs to be confined to a nursing home against his will, Your Honor? Eleanor asked, her voice ringing with righteous indignation. It certainly does not, Judge Holloway said, her eyes narrowing as she glared down at Stephen. But we are not finished, Eleanor said softly. The real killing blow was yet to come. The petitioner centered his entire claim on a so-called near-fatal incident involving a gas stove. Exhibit C. The video from my hidden living room camera played. The court watched in crystal-clear definition as Stephen walked into my kitchen, looked around furtively, reached out, and twisted the stove knob just enough to release the gas before walking away. A collective gasp echoed in the gallery. Stephen bolted up from his chair. That's out of context. I was just checking the burner, he stammered, his polished demeanor shattering into a million pathetic pieces. Judge Holloway slammed her gavel down so hard it echoed like a gunshot. Sit down, Mr. Harrison, she roared. She looked at Stephen with a level of disgust that could curdle milk. In my 20 years on the bench, I have seen families fight over money, but I have rarely witnessed a plot so utterly repulsive, so calculated, and so cruel as the one you have attempted here today. You manufactured a medical crisis and falsified evidence to strip a healthy, independent man of his civil liberties for your own financial gain. She didn't just dismiss the petition with prejudice. She ordered a full transcript of the hearing to be sent to the district attorney's office for potential charges of perjury and elder abuse. Furthermore, she ordered Stephen to pay every single cent of my exorbitant legal fees. As the judge struck her gavel for the final time, Stephen slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Melissa didn't even wait for him. She grabbed her designer purse and practically ran out of the courtroom, fleeing the sinking ship she had helped drill holes into. Eleanor didn't stop at the family court victory. The very next day, we filed a massive civil lawsuit against Stephen and Melissa for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and civil fraud. The financial discovery phase of our lawsuit exposed everything. It laid bare Stephen's failing business, his massive debts, and the predatory loans they had taken out under the assumption that they would soon be cashing a $2 million inheritance check. They were financially annihilated. The legal fees they owed me, combined with the settlement we forced them into, bankrupted them. They lost their home, their cars, and eventually their marriage. Melissa filed for divorce the moment the bank accounts hit zero, proving exactly what kind of love she had harbored all along. I haven't spoken to Stephen since the day we walked out of that courtroom. I changed my locks, updated my will to leave my entire estate to a local charity that supports elderly veterans, and blocked their numbers. Some people ask me if it hurts, essentially making myself an orphan in reverse, losing my only son. The truth is, the boy I loved died a long time ago, consumed by greed. The man in that courtroom was just a stranger trying to rob my house. Today, the sun is shining brightly over Westchester. I sit on my back patio, sipping a hot cup of coffee, watching Buster chase squirrels across the manicured lawn. My home is quiet again, but it is no longer the heavy, sorrowful silence of a lonely widower. It is the deep, profound, unshakable peace of a man who fought for his freedom, defended his castle, and won.